Hello, Sikin. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like almost like a podcast host. This is not a podcast. I just want to have like a casual conversation just to tell people a little bit more about your experience with Illumine. So, Sikin and I just concluded an 8-month Illumine journey. We did the full chakra series. We actually did a couple of extra sessions because we kind of lost track of things. We got really excited. We spent a little more time in some chakras, a little less time in others. It was really flowy, really adaptable. But let's start at the beginning. I want people to get to know you a little bit and hear more about where you were in your personal growth process when you started and what made you say yes, what made you feel like this was the right program.
I'll start with the last question. So I think it must have been last summer that I was in one of your workshops. And right before the workshop, I had been thinking to myself that I really needed to step back into a spiritual space, but something more formal and with more practice, but needed some guidance, and definitely was looking for someone to mentor me or coach me in that space. I had felt stuck. I had lost my way in a few areas of my life. I had had a lot of changed jobs, changed industries, changed cities and countries. And and that was all after coming out of sort of the pandemic time. That was obviously a very, a lot of rapid change in that space as well. So um, I was thinking about that, and then we went into this workshop, and I was there kind of to think about like what would it be like to work with Mandy, because I'd known you for a while at that point, and you had promoted a breakout session, or a breakthrough session. And I was
Mhm.
like, that's exactly what I was looking for. And so it was like that combined with a few other different sort of signs from the universe. I think that probably I wanted to see, but also just really aligned and continued to make me feel certain about um, you being someone I wanted to work with. And also in being in a state of readiness to take that step for myself. That felt like the best self-care for myself at the time. And it felt like I was really ready for a growth journey.
I don't think I ever heard this part of the story. It gives me the warm fuzzies. I love that. The universe's hand, divine intervention all over it. I love it so much. But when you had that idea and you were like, okay, I think I do want to step back into a container where, I have someone who's guiding me, kind of holding me accountable. That was a space that you arrived at not completely new to personal growth, right? You've been on a wellness journey, a growth journey, a spiritual journey for a long time. Like, how would you characterize where you were at on that journey? Like, how long have you been in this sphere and how did you know that, like, okay, maybe it's time to do something new?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've been in that space for just over a decade. I did, a yoga teacher training 11, 12 years ago. I did a grad school program that was very much centered and focused on um, being an agent of change. And that was something that was very profound for me. And the skills and the aptitudes that I think I took away from that were a big part of, interestingly enough, a spiritual journey. Academia and spirituality coming together was super inspiring. And I had kind of taken that and rooted in teaching yoga, teaching meditation, and also infusing it into my leadership skills in a corporate environment. So there was a lot going on there. And I think especially shifting industries from health and wellness, which I had been in to some degree, either part-time and for a long time, full-time as well, over the span of 10 years, and just moving completely out of there. I I think my identity felt like it was changing too. Um, I was really connected, and I identified with being a health and wellness practitioner and someone who is an expert, um, and and someone who loved and thrived in that space. And so it was really challenging for me to wrap my head around, not being part of it every single day anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like you were just going through a lot of change on a lot of different levels, both your physical environment, your work environment, and
Mhm.
on a very kind of internal level in terms of your identity shifting and how you were showing up in the world. And maybe you were looking for something to kind of root you in.
Yeah, like what does life look like in here again? And I think figured out what life looked like in here within all those spaces. And then what happens if you take yourself out of all those different containers, as you call them, and put yourself in like that self container. And I
Yeah.
hadn't done that in a very long time. And I don't know that I had done that in its own context, in a space that wasn't tied to anything. Um, tied to, I think achievement is one of the things that came up a lot, like doing this work in a space that's not tied to achievement, but knowing that, the world, that it opens up your world to figuring out maybe what's next, um, without really having an agenda. And I think that was really powerful for me.
Yeah. I love that you said that. And I really love this emphasis on like, who am I? Not necessarily in relation to all of these outside things, but just like, who am I as an individual myself? And then that can influence how I show up in these other spheres. But I want to be rooted in myself first.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I love what you said about achievement too, because I think that influences all of it, right? Because then we put this pressure that we're supposed to show up in a
yeah.
certain way. And it can be really easy to lose who we are when we
Mhm.
do have that emphasis on achieving, getting to the next level, like showing up, being the best, all of that.
100%. Like, I think as like living in North America probably puts, and being in the corporate area, being someone who is involved in athletics, or even in, an industry of any kind and working, there's this element of like performance culture, no matter where you are, or, needing to perform against like metrics or quotas or a goal that you've set for yourself. And this was kind of like, I think very intentionally, I took it out of the space to really be able to hone in on what it looks like without having any of that in the way. And it
I
was,
think that's a really good point because so much, I think part of the reason why I like doing these interviews is that so much of the work that we do in Illumine is just not really quantifiable. It's not like, oh, here's this very specific result. Here's this quantifiable thing that you've achieved. So, given that that is sort of the culture that you're used to, how would you qualify and what would you say that some of the shifts were that you were able to make that maybe didn't fit into that box that you're used to?
yeah, oh my gosh. Well, I think exposing parts of myself that maybe I was very closed to before, and not doing it for anyone else. Doing it for myself. I think there was spaces that I was not willing to admit that I was locked in, or maybe not even understanding that there was another layer to that. And so much of that, I think by not having an agenda opened me up to be able to discover things I never thought I could. I think one of those areas is just around how I identify with my own culture and my roots and my ancestry, and then it also translated into how I relate to people today and every day, social work, etc. So those are two places that were really a big part of the journey. And then there were parts about how I show up as a leader in the world, and that performance culture that wove in to our discussions. Um, and then there was also the creative center in me. So there's so much more I could say, but I think I would end up going on for a million miles. I think maybe even like such a big theme that ran through all of that, and because there was all these threads that sort of ran through all these like bigger sort of buckets, was even then diving into like the chakras and the the idea of the divine feminine, which is something that I'd never really unpacked or understood. And I got to learn so much more about that and understand how it applies to me. And there was one thing that was really interesting is like, we went from looking at things as one or the other, like with this sort of duality, and like understanding that there is a duality, but also kind of breaking that apart, and like shifting the paradigm from it being one thing or another, to it being a whole bunch of different things, and really exploring the spectrum, of how to look at self and how to look at femininity and how to look at creativity, and how to look at, you know, just even the idea of quiet. Like, what does quiet look like? What does success look like? So it wasn't about like necessarily ignoring those parts of my life that obviously are really important and show up every day, but it was kind of like wasn't focusing on those as the end goal. They came in where they needed to.
Yeah. You said so many great things there. I think we just had such incredible, juicy discussions. How you're talking about the spectrum, because we really got to dive into a lot of different aspects of that spectrum in a lot of different ways. But one thing I want to pull out that you mentioned is this idea of like different threads that kind of carried through the whole series. Because I think sometimes when we think about the chakra system and you know the themes of each chakra, people tend to think like, oh, okay, well, this chakra is about this and that chakra is about that. And we think of it in a very isolated way.
Mhm.
But one thing that we're really intentional about in Illumine is setting a series of intentions at the very beginning and then thinking about how they relate to the themes of each chakra. And we actually find that they're not isolated, right?
Yeah.
The chakras don't work in isolation, and that we get to see almost like a prism. We get to see different faces of this and different perspectives of this as we move through the system. So I'm curious if you could speak to what that was like experientially. Like what was your experience of that?
I feel like every time we went through a chakra and moved to the next one, I could see, I was like, oh, okay. And like there was like this integrative point where everything connected, and I was like, I was moving into the next space. So there was a very strong like continuity and like they and like relation. There was so much relation to what I was going through with a certain aspect of, or a theme. And then how the chakras almost carried you through the learning. And also, I think when we got back up, when we started to move up in the chakras, we also started to circle back down and up again. And there was a bit of a loop that formed. It's like a feedback loop. Like you're working on throat chakra, but your root is giving you feedback. Like, for
Totally.
lack of a better word, it's hard to describe, but maybe easier to visualize that way.
So, what would you say to someone who's like, I have this very specific issue related to my sacral chakra, and they're trying to decide whether they want to do just like a single chakra series or the full series? Like, what would your recommendation be?
I think the word prism is the perfect way to look at it, is that it is a prism, and then to understand it fully, like all the chakras play a role. Like we might look at them in isolation to understand them and where they maybe bring energy or what certain thing, or maybe to bring meaning to certain things. But they're never acting alone. And I think for me to fully understand and to really fully like punctuate the end of this journey was to know that every single chakra moved together as one, even though we were focusing on, maybe clearing space in one to get to the other. Because it's a balancing act. So it's like, here's your theme, and then here are all the chakras. And each theme requires like this understanding and balance of everything in order for it to really open it up.
Yeah. Like even though this theme is related to a chakra specifically, like we can look at that theme through the lens of all of the others and see something different.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a
Yeah.
perfect way. Yeah.
So valuable, I think, to do that. And, you know, obviously a lot can be done just working on a single chakra, but I think if you really want depth to the experience, like rounding out the experience to really kind of dig in. I think one of the pieces of feedback I've gotten from people is that this container is great for changing your perspective on
Yeah.
things. And I think the chakras really lend themselves to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also the modalities, some like the fact that you can utilize different modalities, all of them within each of those spaces for different reasons, um, was also very like interesting to me. It wasn't like this modality for this chakra or this modality for that chakra. It's like, no, they're all related. They can all, work together as one. Um, and in those integration moments, like between sessions, I feel like I would start to move out of one and into the other without formally like saying we're moving out and into the other. So that to me made the connection points of all those two things even deeper. They're working together.
I'm glad you brought up the modalities because I think that might be intimidating to some people to see, oh my gosh, there's all these different modalities. And so, how did you see them really coming together for you? Were there some that you just really liked more than others?
I liked them all for different purposes, and I intuitively felt very comfortable saying, like, I think this is time. I think it's time for Reiki. Like, I think I need Reiki right now in order to be able to, move through whatever I was experiencing, whether it was just my energy telling me that or understanding kind of where I was in that journey, or in that part of the journey. I love, I loved the tapping. As you know, I wax on and on about it. It was for me, it's something that continue the minute we brought it in, it hasn't left my repertoire. It was so accessible. It was just shockingly transformative in such a like easy and short period of time. And it, yeah, like every morning I wake up and I tap and it's wonderful. And then I love, in a similar vein, I love Reiki because it created that container of space for me to feel held. And um, yeah, those two things for me definitely stand out the most. I loved the breath work as well. Um, and we definitely had some really interesting things come out of that, but I would say Reiki,
Yeah.
they were like, just, yes, they like hit me right here.
The nice thing about the Reiki, I think, as a modality, one of the reasons why I love it is that you don't have to do anything.
Mhm.
It's one of those beautiful moments where it's like, I can't mess this up. There's no wrong way to do it. I don't have to effort. There's
Mhm.
nothing I have to do, which I think is really important on this journey because it can sometimes feel like a slog when you're growing and changing and expanding. It's like, oh, it's hard work.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice when you get to have those days where it's like, oh, I can just fill up. I can just receive and feel good and I don't have to effort. And then same thing with the tapping where you are putting forth a little bit of effort, but the reward is so much greater than the effort that you're putting in. And I really love the way that we used it as well, which was like, there was one particular issue that we're like, I feel like there's a lot of layers to this. And so we did multiple sessions kind of back to back to back. And it was like, okay, we'll get the first layer in this session and the next layer here. And we're able to just take it a lot deeper because as you moved through a layer, more stuff would come to the surface that we weren't able to see before because we were
Yeah.
able to figure out that space, which was really cool.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point about like being able to take things at a pace that they're meant to be taken at as well. Like that could have been one big ball of things to tap through, and we're like, okay, no, we need to split this up because it's too big. And let time in between to process and see if next week we need to shift anything before we go into the next round.
Yeah.
So that part of the
So
process,
glad you said that. Yeah. Because I think sometimes a longer container can be intimidating to people,
but
but actually that spaciousness just gives you so much more I don't want to reuse the word space, but it just creates a lot of energetic space for you to be able to take your time and slow down and not feel like you're constantly behind or constantly efforting or
Mhm.
even feeling like, oh my gosh, I haven't done my homework. Like sometimes we can treat it like a job in that way. And I think having a longer container allows you to relax around it a little.
Yeah, 100, I feel that when you say that because like I was definitely looking for ease. And I think the phrase that you used with me at the beginning was like being poured into. And I felt that throughout the entire time we were working together, that like I needed ease. I needed like a restful space. I needed it to feel like it wasn't a new task that I had to complete. And it never felt that way. It always just it felt like care.
That makes me so happy to hear. I still feel that. Like I feel the my body. It feels so cozy. I love it. So then to wrap this up,
Yeah.
if there's somebody who's maybe on the fence, who's considering doing the program, would you have any like insight as to like who you think it would be best for or how they would know if it's the right program for them? Like, do you have any counsel around that?
Um, I think if things are important to you, or when things are important to me, they're coming up in my mind all the time. And they're getting in the way of maybe me moving forward, maybe me, moving at all. And when I know something's coming up for me a lot over time, I know it's time to do something about it. So I don't think you have to be someone who's, knows a lot about health and wellness to do a program like this, or someone who, is looking, even if you're not looking for a specific outcome, you're just trying to like unblock something, or you're really looking for a way to have self-care and learn and grow. Um, this is it's a space that is good for all of those things. And I don't know, it's just it's just good. Like it's just amazing. It's so hard to describe. I guess I'm trying to think about like for me, it's just that importance thing. So if something's speaking to me, I'm listening, and if I'm not listening, it's gonna get louder. And so like if you what are the things that are loud for you right now or that won't go away? What are the things that are maybe inhibiting you from feeling like you're standing, in your full power, or feeling your best self every day, or that are maybe making you question yourself in some way, shape, or form? And any of those things can have a place in this space. Um, it doesn't have to be about wellness. It can be about wellness. It can be about entrepreneurship. I think for me, like I was looking for a space to explore like what entrepreneurship could be like again in the future. And that thing got unlocked just as a result, not because I looked for it. I also was able to unlock like as a leader in a corporate space. Oh my gosh, like what a huge like impact this had on me for that as well, and just being able to grow into a new role while I was in the space. That was massive. So like big changes like that in your career, major shifts in your life. I had just moved to a new country with my partner. And so if you're going through a massive change and you're feeling it, I don't think I necessarily admitted it to myself that I was feeling it until I really got in the room and was like, actually going through a lot of change right now. Um, and we did that breakthrough session, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this needs to happen. There's so much going on here. Um, so yeah, feeling stuck, getting unstuck, going through major change, looking to develop yourself as a professional or as a leader, looking to, inspire yourself creatively, looking to inspire yourself in general. Those are
Mhm.
all beautiful places to be, and to just acknowledge that you're in that space, and then be able to have someone who can carry you through it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's important to note too that like I think it was maybe a month or two into the program that you were promoted into a new position at work. And I think sometimes people don't realize that when you make a commitment like this, an energetic commitment, a financial commitment, all of that
Mhm.
to growth, that is like a signal to the universe that you're ready for the next level. And I see that happen a lot, within the first, even sometimes the first couple days of even just saying yes. Maybe we haven't even had a session yet, or we've only had like one or two sessions, and big life events happen, like, a big career change, or someone gets pregnant, or a big promotion, or something like that, right? And I think it's because you're saying yes to the universe and you're like, no, I'm ready for something new. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to up level. And so it was really cool to see that happen. And then to be able to kind of be there for the process of you just like acclimating to that new position and like really stepping into your power in it too. It's
Oh,
really cool.
I couldn't have gotten through that whole whole time without you. That
I
was
was honored to be a
very
part of that journey, honestly, because that was a lot that you went through. And I think you handled it so beautifully and just like so gracefully. And it was really cool to watch you integrate the things that we were talking about in that space.
thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really special.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your experience. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I'm super grateful for you. It is always bittersweet to end an
Mhm.
Illumine series. After 8 months, you really get used to seeing a person weekly, and I've really missed seeing you. But it's so nice to get to connect. Um,
Maybe we should do a podcast.
oh yeah, that I mean, coming soon. We've talked about this because we have epic deep talk, like I mean, next level kind of deep talk. I feel like our minds work in different ways, and so we get to really go really deep with it. So we'll have to keep people posted about that.
Yes, we sure will. Well, thanks for having me here. And this was great. It was so nice to actually reflect on the whole journey again. That
Yeah,
was
it's really nice for me too. Thanks for being open to it.